Aliens scan a human warship and instantly regret it. HFY Sci-Fi story. The alien fleet, the Zorith Collective, hovered in silence at the edge of human space. For centuries, they had watched the Terrans, humans, grow from primitive beings to a rising star among the stars. Their ships were crude at first, their weapons unrefined, but they had the most dangerous thing of all: relentless determination. Commander Vierock of the Zorith fleet had heard the rumors about humans. They were a species that fought tooth and nail for survival, but more concerning was their ability to overcome seemingly insurmountable odds. The Zorith had encountered many species in their conquest of the galaxy, and few had proven troublesome. But something about humans was different. "Scan the human vessel," Vierock ordered, his tentacles shifting nervously. They had encountered their first human warship at the far edge of the Outer Rim. It was small compared to Zorith standards, but it was formidable, heavily armed, and clearly battle-hardened. A sub-commander, her voice tinged with reverence and caution, responded, "Yes, Commander, we are beginning the scan now." The massive sensor array of the Zorith flagship locked onto the human warship, and the data began pouring in. The warship's design was sleek, utilitarian, nothing overly extravagant, just efficient. The Zorith had seen plenty of these before, but then the readings started to spike. There was a disturbance in the energy fields surrounding the human ship, a level of activity that suggested something far more dangerous than anticipated. Subsystems flared with intense readings, sophisticated weaponry, advanced energy shielding, and an offensive capacity that far exceeded what any species of their size could typically field. "What is this?" Vierock demanded, his tentacles twitching in frustration. The data was so overwhelming that it felt almost alive. His senses were bombarded, unable to filter out the noise. "Scanning deeper," said the sub-commander. Her voice wavered as she increased the scan intensity. "There's something strange. The human warship is reactive." The energy signatures began to coalesce into a singular pattern, a distinct trace that sent a chill down the spine of every Zorith on the bridge. The ship wasn't just a vessel, it was a predator, and it had been designed to kill. One by one, the individual components of the human warship flashed onto the screen: tactical systems, weapons storage, engines, armor, and, most concerning, an intricate neural network that was entirely self-repairing. There was no weakness to exploit, no vulnerability that could be easily identified. The entire ship appeared alive. The Zorith had been scanning ships for centuries. They knew the anatomy of warfare better than any species in the galaxy. But this was unlike anything they had encountered. "We need to withdraw," the sub-commander whispered, her voice quivering. The scan's intensity was now causing interference in their own systems. Vierock leaned forward, eyes widening as the realization hit him like a shockwave. He had seen it now, something that no Zorith had fully understood before. The humans weren't just building ships, they were building war machines. The warship wasn't just made for battle, it wanted battle. It thrived on it. Before he could issue a retreat order, a sudden pulse of energy flared from the human warship, nearly breaking through their sensors. It was a warning, a threat. "Commander," the sub-commander said, her voice filled with growing panic. "The ship is sending a message. It's too strong. The scan, it's triggering something. It's responding to us." Vierock's body tensed. The pulse wasn't just an attack. It was as if the warship had sent a message to its creators: "You are being watched. You are being judged." Then, without warning, the Zorith flagship systems froze. The entire fleet's communications went silent, their data streams corrupted. The human warship had somehow hacked into their sensors, disabling their ability to monitor or even understand what had just happened. It was as if the humans had anticipated this and built their ships specifically to outmaneuver anything the Zorith could do. "We've been compromised," one of the officers yelled. Vierock felt the tension in his body snap. The full weight of the situation crashed down on him. They had made a grave mistake. They had underestimated the humans, and now they were in danger of being trapped in a war they were not prepared for. "Withdraw the fleet," Vierock growled, his voice thick with frustration. "Immediately, before we provoke them further." As the Zorith began their retreat, the human warship's engines flared to life. They didn't pursue, they didn't need to. The message had been sent. Back in the heart of Zorith space, high-ranking officials would debate the encounter for years to come. Some would call it a fluke, others a misunderstanding, but for Commander Vierak and his fleet, the truth was undeniable. They had just come face to face with the human spirit, and that, more than any weapon or ship, was what made them the most dangerous species in the galaxy. For humans, the only thing stronger than their will to survive was their desire to win. Aliens scan a human warship and instantly regret it. HFY Sci-Fi Story, Part 2. The Zorith fleet limped back into the dark void of space, the hum of their failing systems a constant reminder of their miscalculation. In their retreat, they couldn't shake the overwhelming sense of vulnerability. For the first time in years, the Zorith felt small. Commander Vierak paced in his quarters aboard the flagship, his tentacles twitching restlessly. His mind raced as he replayed the events. How had the human warship been so far beyond their expectations? How had it fought back so quickly and decisively, neutralizing their scanning systems with a simple pulse of energy? He couldn't shake the nagging thought, what if the human ship had been toying with them? "Commander," came a voice over his comm unit, sharp and urgent. Vierak's eyes narrowed. "Yes, what is it?" "It's about the humans. They've left the outer rim," said the officer, "but not only that. We've detected multiple ships moving in their direction, from all sectors." Vierak's heart skipped a beat. "What are you saying? Are they pursuing us?" The officer's voice crackled with disbelief. "It's not just a few ships, sir. We've detected over 20 warships, and several support fleets. They've established a battle formation." Vierak blinked. More ships? The humans had a fleet that large? No, that wasn't possible. The Zorith had wiped out their largest colonies. The human forces in this region were small, just a few scattered ships, mostly cargo haulers and civilian transport vessels. "What do you mean? Battle formation? Explain yourself," he barked. The officer's reply sent a cold shiver down Vierak's spine. "They're ships, they're not just organizing. They're preparing for something. We've never seen them move like this before, Commander. We think they're readying for war." Vierak paused. His mind raced through the possibilities. If this was true, it meant the humans hadn't just been waiting for their chance to retaliate, they had been building, gathering their forces, and they had anticipated the Zorith fleet's movements. A cold realization hit him. The humans didn't just defend their territory, they waited, and they planned. Vierak had underestimated them in the worst way possible. The Terrans didn't just fight, they adapted, learned, and waited for the perfect moment to strike. "Where are they now?" Vierak asked, his voice low and dangerous. "They're heading directly towards our position, Commander," the officer replied, panic creeping into their voice. "We'll be within their reach in less than 2 hours." Vierak stood still, his tentacles writhing. The room felt too small, as though the walls were closing in on him. The Zorith had never been in this kind of situation before. They were not a race to be ambushed. They did not retreat in fear. Yet, what they were facing now was something entirely different. "We're too close to engage," Vierak muttered, "but they won't stop until they've wiped us out." He turned to the officer. "Order the fleet to engage the warp engines. We're not sticking around to see what they've prepared." As the order went out, Vierak moved to the control center. The Zorith fleet began to break formation and engage their jump drives, warping into the fold of space. They had no choice but to flee, to buy themselves more time. But as their ships began to shift into hyperspace, something strange happened. A sudden wave of static hit their communication systems, followed by a chilling, deep growl. The distorted sound was unmistakable. A message from the humans. "We know you're running, but we'll find you. And when we do, you'll wish you never crossed us." It was a threat, but more than that, it was a declaration of war. Vierak felt the pulse of dread run through his body. This wasn't just about the warships or the tactical advantages. The humans were more than just a military force. They were a cultural threat, a force that would not only destroy their enemies but completely alter the landscape of the galaxy. "We have to regroup," Vierak said, his voice clipped with urgency. "Contact all fleets. We need to rethink our strategy." But his words came too late. As the fleet jumped deeper into space, another fleet of human ships suddenly appeared at the edge of their range. These ships didn't wait to attack. They opened fire immediately, the energy blasts from their cannons striking with unrelenting precision. It was the human response Vierak had feared. A force that would not only retaliate but actively pursue. The Zorith fleet scrambled to retaliate, but the humans were already on top of them. Every calculated move they made seemed to fall into the humans' trap. The humans had planned for everything. Every weakness was exploited, every countermeasure anticipated. Vierak knew it now. This wasn't just a skirmish. This was the beginning of a war the Zorith had no hope of winning unless they adapted. And the humans had already won the first battle. Back on Earth, high above the stars, the Terran High Command watched the conflict unfold. Their warships moved with purpose, as if each maneuver had been rehearsed 1,000 times before. Behind every human action, there was the mind of a strategist, a soldier, a survivor who had lived through battles the Zorith couldn't even comprehend. It was a battle for survival, yes, but more than that, it was a battle for dominion. The human will was indomitable, and their ships? They were merely the physical manifestations of that will. And as the Zorith fleet retreated into the vast emptiness, they were left with a simple, terrifying realization: the humans had just begun, and they would never stop. To be continued. Aliens scan a human warship, and instantly regretted HFY Sci-Fi story, Part 3. The Zorith fleet, battered and bruised from their first encounter with the humans, drifted through the emptiness of deep space. Vierak, sitting in his command chair, stared out of the observation window. His mind was a battlefield of thoughts, raging between pride, fear, and anger. How could we have missed this? He muttered under his breath. How did they prepare so quickly? The officer beside him, still recovering from the shock of their retreat, hesitated before speaking. Commander, we underestimated them. These Terrans, they're not like anything we've encountered. Their warships aren't just machines, they're more than that. Everything they have is designed for war. They've spent decades, centuries building up to this moment. Vierak clenched his fists, frustration mounting. You think we were the first to see that? They didn't just build warships, they built a culture of warfare. Every person in their society is a soldier. Every child, every civilian knows the cost of battle. They live war. But that's what makes them dangerous. Sir, the officer added, his voice trembling. We've never faced a species like this before. They don't just fight for survival. They fight to win, and they don't stop until they've crushed their enemy. Vierak's gaze hardened. They will regret underestimating us. We will show them that no species can challenge the Zorith and survive. On Earth, deep within the heart of the Terran High Command, General Kiera Williams stood in front of a massive holographic map. The tension in the room was palpable. The war with the Zorith had only just begun, but already, they had sent a clear message: we will not be pushed aside. Her fingers traced along the projection of the Zorith fleet, now scattered in several different directions, attempting to regroup after the first strike. Commander Vierak doesn't understand it yet, General Williams said, her voice cold and precise. But he's already lost. The Zorith don't know what they've unleashed. The moment they invaded human space, they made it personal. She turned to her officers, who were carefully watching every movement in the galaxy's expanse. We've been preparing for this. Every move, every battle, every war that's ever been fought by humanity, it's all led to this. The Zorith won't break us. Not now. Not ever. One of the officers, Captain Cade, leaned in. General, if they regroup and send in reinforcements? We won't give them the chance. She interrupted. We know how they think. The Zorith are tactical. They value strength, and they will counter us head-on. But what they don't know is that we've already anticipated that. We've learned how to turn their strategy against them. It's time to end this. Back in the void of Zorith space, Commander Vierak wasn't about to accept defeat. The retreat had stung, but he was a leader. His pride would not allow him to stay passive. He convened with his most trusted officers in the war room, his expression grim. Prepare the fleet. We're launching a counteroffensive. But Commander, one officer protested, we don't even know where they are. They're too fast. They've already proven they can track us across the galaxy. Vierak's tentacles flexed with growing anger. We know their tactics. We've studied them. We'll corner them in a blind sector of space and trap them. We'll force them into a fight they can't win. You can't be serious. Another officer argued. The humans will. The humans will regret facing the Zorith. Vierak growled. They've forced our hand. Now we take the war to them. He slammed his fist down onto the console, ending the argument. No more hesitation. Prepare the ships. The Zorith never retreat. Not again. Meanwhile, the humans were not waiting idly by. General Williams' orders were clear. Take the fight to them. The Terran fleet, unlike the Zorith, didn't need to wait for the perfect moment, they created it. A few days after the initial engagement, human warships entered the same sector the Zorith had once called home. The humans had learned everything they needed to know about their enemies' movements. They had studied the Zorith fleet's strengths, but more importantly, they had studied their weaknesses. We know how they operate, General Williams said to her officers. We know what they fear, and it's not us. It's being outsmarted. The first attack came when the Zorith fleet thought they had the upper hand. They thought they had trapped the Terrans in a far-off sector, isolated and surrounded. But the moment they engaged, they realized something was wrong. Human ships, once thought to be scattered, moved in perfect sync. What appeared to be a fleet of isolated ships was, in fact, a massive trap. The Terrans had positioned their forces with a strategic brilliance that took the Zorith by surprise. The Zorith fired, their massive weapons tearing through the empty space, but the humans were already there, out of range of their guns, and the Zorith's advanced sensors were useless. The human ships fired in rapid succession, hitting critical points on the Zorith flagship, disabling their systems one by one. Commander, they've already bypassed our defensive grids, an officer screamed as explosions erupted on their flagship. We can't counteract them, everything is offline. Vierock's eyes widened in disbelief. No, how did they? They knew. General Williams' voice crackled through the communication line. You think you're the only ones who can plan? You think you're the only ones who can adapt? The Zorith fleet was reeling, but it was too late. The humans had anticipated every move. They had turned their own tactics against them, and now the Zorith fleet was in full retreat. Back on Earth, General Williams watched the outcome unfold on her screen. The battle had been brutal, but the message was clear. The Zorith had underestimated humanity. We've won this round, she said, her voice filled with resolve. But this war? It's only just begun. To be continued. Aliens scan a human warship, and instantly regret it. HFY Sci-Fi Story, Part 4. The Zorith fleet, now battered and scattered, limped through the depths of space. The shame of their defeat hung over them like a dark cloud. Commander Vierock, once brimming with the pride of his people, now felt the weight of failure pressing down on his shoulders. The humans had proven something the Zorith could not afford to ignore. They were not like any species the Zorith had ever faced. The Zorith warships had retreated to a distant nebula, hiding among the swirling clouds of gas and dust to regroup. The damage from the last battle was extensive, and the fleet was in no shape to fight again. But Vierock knew they had no choice. The humans would come, and they would come prepared. They've outsmarted us at every turn, Vierock muttered as he watched the flickering status reports on his command screen. Every move we made, they anticipated it. At the far end of the command room, his senior strategist, Zathril, approached cautiously. Commander, we are not without options. We can rebuild. We have the resources to recover. Vierock turned to face Zathril, his eyes cold and calculating. Rebuild? After everything we've lost? What will it take to break the humans? To teach them that they cannot defy the Zorith? Zathril hesitated, but then spoke with uncharacteristic conviction. Perhaps it is not their strength we need to break, Commander, but their resolve. Perhaps we need to show them the cost of war. If we strike their homeworld, they will bend. They will beg for mercy. Vierock stared at him for a long moment, his mind racing. Striking Earth, attacking the cradle of humanity itself, was a bold move. But it was also their only chance for vengeance. The humans had embarrassed them. They had proven that the Zorith were no longer the most dangerous species in the galaxy. We do it, Vierock said suddenly. His voice was low, filled with a dark promise. We strike Earth. We burn their world to ash. Back on Earth, General Kiera Williams was no stranger to the gravity of war. But what she had felt in the aftermath of the first battle against the Zorith had been different. It wasn't just the victory, it was the certainty that this conflict was far from over. The Zorith were ruthless. They would not stop until they had crushed humanity beneath their heel. And that was a mistake. The war room was eerily quiet as General Williams stood before a massive holographic map. her eyes scanning the positions of every fleet, every ship, every human soldier scattered across the galaxy. The Zorith would come again, they would regroup and strike harder, smarter. "General," said Captain Cade, his voice tinged with concern, "we've intercepted communications. The Zorith, they're planning something big. They're heading toward Earth." Williams clenched her fists. "It's happening, isn't it? They're coming for us. We don't know how many ships they have, but we estimate they'll arrive in 3 to 4 days, possibly less." Her heart sank, but she didn't show it. "We can't wait for them to strike first. This time, we'll be ready." She turned toward her officers. "Prepare the fleet. I want every warship, every fighter, and every resource we have in place by the time the Zorith arrive. We're not going to wait for them to destroy our home. We're going to make sure they regret coming here." The room was filled with murmurs of agreement, but William's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "We're going to send a message they won't forget. We don't just defend our home, we protect it. We'll show the Zorith that this is humanity's war to win." Meanwhile, the Zorith fleet was on the move. Their forces had been rebuilt, their morale restored, and their resolve hardened. They were heading toward Earth with one goal in mind: to annihilate humanity once and for all. Commander Vierak stood at the head of his flagship, staring at the coordinates that would take them to Earth's orbit. "This is it," he said coldly. "We will crush them beneath our claws. No more hesitation, no more mistakes." Zathril, standing at his side, smiled grimly. "We'll leave nothing behind. Earth will be a memory." The Zorith warships surged forward, their engines roaring as they sped through the stars. The human fleet would be waiting, of course, but the Zorith believed they had the advantage. The humans were outmatched in both numbers and firepower. They had no chance. But what Vierak didn't know was that humanity had already prepared for this day. The moment the Zorith began their assault, the human forces would meet them head-on. General Williams sat in the command chair of the Terran flagship. The victory's dawn. As the human fleet entered Earth's orbit, the Zorith were still days away, but every officer aboard the ship knew that this was the calm before the storm. "General, all fleets are in position," Captain Cade reported, his voice steady. "We're ready." Williams nodded. "Good. Prepare the fleets for evasive maneuvers and immediate engagement. The Zorith will try to overwhelm us with their numbers, but we've studied their tactics. We know their weaknesses." She looked over at the tactical map. The Zorith fleet would arrive soon, but the human ships were already in place, hidden behind asteroids, behind the dark side of the moon, in the asteroid fields surrounding Earth. The Zorith wouldn't know what hit them. "We won't let them destroy Earth," Williams said with cold certainty. "We're going to make sure they never forget who they're dealing with." The silence in the war room was broken by the hum of the ship's engines as the Victory's Dawn prepared to face the incoming threat. The moment came faster than they expected. A bright flash in the distance, then another, and another. The Zorith had arrived. The first barrage of Zorith weapons fired, lighting up the black expanse of space. But before they could land a hit, the humans were already moving, swift, precise, and deadly. It wasn't a full-fledged battle yet, just the opening skirmish, but it was enough to tell Vierak everything he needed to know. The humans weren't backing down. They weren't running. They were fighting. The Zorith fleet tried to close in, but the humans were already executing maneuvers that Vierak had never seen before. Their ships, smaller, faster, and more agile than anything the Zorith had encountered, danced around their larger warships, dodging their fire, and returning their own with pinpoint precision. The battle had begun, but the Zorith were not prepared for the storm of destruction humanity would unleash. To be continued. Aliens scan a human warship, and instantly regret it. HFY Sci-Fi Story, Part 5. The Zorith fleet, confident in their overwhelming numbers, had underestimated the sheer audacity and brilliance of the Terran forces. As their ships moved into Earth's orbit, they found themselves not attacking a planet unprepared, but a force that had anticipated every move. The first wave of Zorith fire surged through space toward the Terran fleet, but the human warships, smaller and more agile, danced through the barrage. The Zorith's slow, lumbering ships were no match for the human fleet's rapid evasive maneuvers. Missiles sailed past, narrowly missing their targets. The Zorith didn't know it yet, but they had already stepped into a trap. General Kira Williams stood at the command center of the Victory's Dawn, watching as her ships systematically dodged and counterattacked. "It's time to end this," she said quietly, more to herself than anyone else in the room. "General, they're organizing a second wave," Captain Cade reported, eyes glued to the screens. "They're not pulling back, but they're still trying to concentrate their fire." Williams' gaze hardened. "Let them try." She turned to the tactical officer. "Activate the phase shift defense system, and move all fleets into the secondary formation. We're going to hit them from all sides." As the human warships shifted formation, the Zorith saw what they had failed to account for: humanity's ability to think beyond the immediate fight. The humans weren't trying to win a battle, they were preparing to win the war. The Victory's Dawn and its sister ships suddenly vanished, blinking out of sight as their phase shift generators activated. The Zorith, already on edge, scrambled to react, but the Terran fleet was gone, leaving nothing but a trail of distorted energy behind. In the instant that the human ships reappeared on the Zorith fleet's flank, they unleashed a devastating wave of fire. Plasma cannons and railguns struck with unerring accuracy, tearing into the Zorith warship's shields and armor. The Zorith were caught in a vicious pincer attack, unable to adjust their position fast enough. "Commander Virok," a voice screamed over the calm, panic lacing the words. "Our forward shields are failing. We're losing power." Virok slammed his fist onto the control panel, his mind racing. They had never been outgunned like this before. The humans were too fast, too unpredictable, and this new technology, this phase-shifting trick, they hadn't even seen it coming. The Zorith flagship shuddered under the relentless bombardment. Virok gritted his teeth, struggling to maintain control of his ship's systems. "Return fire. Launch the full assault. We will not be defeated by these puny humans." But it was too late. The human ships had already deployed another surprise: miniature drone swarms. Thousands of small, highly maneuverable drones, each armed with explosive charges, darted toward the Zorith fleet. They were too fast for the Zorith ships to target effectively, and they hit with the precision of a surgeon's knife. Explosions erupted across the Zorith ships, and the fleet began to fracture. Virok could feel the tide of the battle slipping from his control, and his worst fears were beginning to materialize. On Earth, the news of the initial human victory spread like wildfire. General Williams had delivered her message loud and clear. The Zorith had underestimated humanity, and now the galaxy would know the price of underestimating them. Within the heart of Earth's command center, there was no celebration, only determination. The Terran fleet had successfully pushed the Zorith back, but Williams knew that this was just one victory in a long and brutal war. "General," said an officer, "we've detected several smaller Zorith fleets trying to regroup. They're trying to escape and reorganize, but we've got their coordinates. Do we move in for the final strike?" Williams hesitated for a moment, staring out at the swirling expanse of space on the map. Then she turned back to the officer with a cold smile. "Absolutely not," she said firmly. "We're going to give them one more chance to know who they're fighting. Set course for Zorith Prime." There was a hushed silence in the room as her words sank in. Zorith Prime, the heart of the Zorith Empire. It was where the Zorith had their strongest defenses, their war strategies, their leadership, and it was where the Terran fleet would send a message they would never forget. The Zorith, meanwhile, were on the retreat, but their pride kept them from fleeing completely. Their ships limped toward their homeworld. Zorith Prime, desperate to recover and regroup. The once mighty fleet now appeared fragile, scattered, and broken. Virok's command ship was a wreck, its systems barely functional after the brutal assault. As the Zorith fleet neared their homeworld, Virok turned to his tactical officer, his face lined with rage. "They are coming for us," he growled. "They're not going to stop until we're destroyed. I will not let them." Before he could finish his sentence, an officer on the bridge cried out in alarm. "Commander, they've found us." Virok's eyes snapped to the display as a new set of human ships appeared out of nowhere, flanking their fleet in a perfectly synchronized formation. There were no warnings, no time to prepare. And in the blink of an eye, the humans launched everything they had. "Brace for impact," the officer screamed, but it was too late. The human fleet had adapted, they had learned. The moment they had identified the location of Zorith Prime, they had already set their course. The Terran ships moved in flawless harmony, delivering wave after wave of destruction. The Zorith flagship erupted in flames. A third of the fleet was obliterated in moments. The Zorith, who had thought themselves masters of war, now faced a brutal reality. The humans had outclassed them in every way. Vierock stood frozen at the sight, horror creeping over him. He couldn't understand it. This wasn't just a war. This was an execution. A species had been reduced to nothing. "We can't stop them, we're going to lose." The words came from the tactical officer, almost in disbelief. But Vierock knew it was true. The humans had made one thing clear: they were not just fighting to survive, they were fighting to win. And no matter how powerful the Zorith thought they were, they had underestimated the human will. On Earth, General Williams stood once again before the holographic map, watching the destruction unfold in real time. She wasn't smiling, though. The battle was far from over. The war was far from over. "We've won this round," she said quietly, "but the Zorith will come again. They'll never stop until they've wiped us out, or we've wiped them out." She turned to the officers behind her, her voice resolute. "We'll fight, we'll survive, and we'll show them, again and again, what it means to underestimate humanity." To be continued. Aliens scan a human warship, and instantly regretted. HFY Sci-Fi Story, Part 6. The remnants of the Zorith fleet were scattered across the stars, crippled, demoralized, and on the verge of collapse. The invasion of Earth had been a catastrophic failure for them, and now the Zorith, once the galaxy's most feared empire, were faced with the unthinkable: defeat at the hands of humanity. Vierock, the once proud commander of the Zorith forces, sat in the darkened command center of his ship, the Razor's Edge, staring at the swirling cosmos outside. The space between him and his people seemed endless. His people, his fleet, were shattered. Their pride was gone. And worst of all, they had underestimated a species they thought they could crush without effort. "Commander," Zathral's voice cut through his thoughts. The strategist was standing beside him, his form tense with the weight of the situation. "The humans, they know where we are." Vierock's eyes narrowed, his fists clenching. "I know. I've felt their gaze for days now." Zathral hesitated before continuing, his voice strained. "They've already begun to pursue. And their fleets, they're organized. Commander, they've regrouped faster than we expected. Their ships, they've learned from the last engagement. They know us better than we know ourselves." Vierock's mind raced. The humans, who had been barely able to hold their own against the Zorith just days before, were now hunting them down with terrifying precision. Their strategy had shifted from survival to domination. And Vierock realized that Earth's victory wasn't a fluke, it was a declaration. Humanity wasn't simply defending their planet. They were taking the fight to the stars. "Prepare the fleet," Vierock ordered. His voice was colder now, more calculated. "We must make one last stand. If we retreat, we dishonor the Zorith name. But if we fight, we may die with dignity." On Earth, the war was far from over. General Kiera Williams stood once again before the map, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. The Zorith were regrouping, and though they had suffered massive losses, they were still a dangerous enemy. Humanity's victory at Zorith Prime had been monumental. But now the time for celebration was over. The enemy still had teeth, and the Terrans would have to face them head-on once more. "General, we've confirmed that the Zorith fleet is moving toward the Outer Rim," Captain Cade reported, his voice unwavering. "They're trying to recover, but their ships are still heavily damaged. We have a window to end this." Williams considered the report. The Zorith were beaten, but not yet broken. There was still a chance they could regroup and mount another assault. But this time, humanity was ready. The tactical advantage was theirs. "We're not letting them recover," Williams said with grim resolve. "We've learned how they fight. We've learned how they think. This time, we end it. Prepare the fleet for immediate deployment. We're going to hunt them down and finish this." The room fell silent as her officers exchanged looks of grim determination. This was no longer a war of defense. It was a war of extinction. Far away in the depths of space, Vierock watched as the last remnants of his fleet limped toward the Outer Rim. The Zorith were attempting to rebuild, to repair their ships and reinforce their positions. But he knew it wouldn't be enough. He could feel the weight of their losses. Even if they succeeded in escaping, the human threat would never relent. He turned to Zathral. "What do we do now? Do we run? Do we beg for peace?" Zathral's answer was calm but filled with dark conviction. There is no peace left for us, Commander. There is only death. Or victory. Vierak knew the truth of Zathral's words. The Zorith had no place in the galaxy now. Not after the humans had shown them what true warfare meant. The humans had given them no option but to fight, to the bitter end. Then we will die as Zorith, Vierak said. We will fight until the last ship falls. The Terran fleet, led by the Victory's Dawn, surged forward through space, closing in on the Zorith's final position. General Williams stood at the head of the battle-ready force, her mind sharp and focused. This was no longer a mission of survival. This was a mission of annihilation. All ships, she said into the comms, her voice echoing through the fleet. This is our last chance to end this war. We will fight with everything we have. We will show the Zorith what it truly means to face humanity in battle. No mercy, no retreat. We fight until their empire is nothing but a distant memory. The fleet rumbled in agreement, the hum of their engines a testament to their readiness. They were ready for this. The final battle began with an explosion of light, as the Zorith fleet attempted to repel the human advance. Their damaged ships fired everything they had, but it was clear from the first volley that they were no match for the combined might of the Terran forces. The human ships cut through the Zorith's defenses with ruthless precision, focusing on key targets, their power cores, their weapon systems, their engines. As the Zorith flagship, the Razor's Edge, struggled to stay operational, Vierak gave the order for one final charge. We die together, he muttered under his breath. The Zorith ships surged forward, desperate, but the human fleet was everywhere, unpredictable, quick, and deadly. The Zorith couldn't keep up. The humans had learned how to anticipate their moves, how to adapt to their strategies. On board the Victory's Dawn, General Williams observed the destruction with cold calculation. They're collapsing, she said. They're retreating into chaos. Let's make sure they don't recover. Firing, Captain Cade responded. The Zorith flagship exploded in a blinding flash, the last of the fleet crumbling in the wake of humanity's unrelenting assault. The battle was over. The Zorith fleet was gone. In its place lay only the wreckage of a once mighty empire, shattered and broken. Vierak, the last of the Zorith commanders, was dead. The Zorith, as a force to be reckoned with, were no more. But the war had changed something deeper than just the defeat of an alien empire. Humanity had proven to the galaxy that they would not be dominated, that they would not bend to anyone, no matter the cost. They had fought for their home, for their people, and they had won. General Williams stood on the bridge of the Victory's Dawn, watching the stars beyond. The silence that followed the battle was a strange and solemn one. The war was over, but the victory had not come without cost. We've won, she said softly, though there was no joy in her voice, but we've also sent a message. She turned to her crew. Humanity will never bow. The end.